Hello, everybody. I didn't see you there. Welcome to the American Sci-Fi Classics Track on Thursday night. The only good and honorable thing to do on a Thursday night. You've made the right choice. Tonight we are talking about an amazing show that probably was a formative geek experience for many of us. And
but enough about Manimal.
Fine. That's fine. Well, what we're talking about is MST3K, but because Gary talked the smack about Manimal. By the way, Tom, you gotta change your name to something MST3K related. Why? Why do you not read redirections?
Sorry, Torgo did not get directions. Torgo's still trying to bring Pepsi.
Get to work on that. But since
cameo,
it's a little riffer.
I love it.
That's my TV's Frank.
Nice. But because Gary saw fit to say a harsh word about Manimal, I'm going to let you guys keep on doing this thing.
Whoa.
Oh. He left us. Oh, my.
He's... Run amok! Amok! All right. So, double checking everything. So, I will... let's see here. Sorry, I have somebody messaging me. Joy of Live Productions.
Watch Gary take a message during the podcast.
No one.
This is riveting YouTube video. Whatever we're doing.
This is fine quality. Next Sunday. Okay, so let's we are here. So we are here to talk about MST3K, but let's get this panel started by introducing our panelist roll call, and we'll start with this gentleman right there in the corner.
Yes, hello, I'm Manos. No, just kidding. I am JC De La Torre. I am the creator of 2 audio dramas, Vampires of Whitechapel and Continuum Force, and I'm working on a new animated series called Star Mage.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And above me. I'm gonna keep poking me because it's fun.
Yes.
My name is Deanna Toxopeus. I am the person who runs the RevSF Facebook page, and I have 2 guests with me this evening.
Ooh, Gypsy.
So, should actually probably be coming down like that, but
Yeah, Gypsy should.
but yeah. And I didn't bring Crow because I thought we'd have Joe, so we didn't need Crow. But
you always need Crow. Or to be accurate, we always need Crow. All right, and then up here.
I'm Kevin Cafferty. I make documentaries that no one watches and podcasts that no one listens to. And I'm wearing my Creature Double Feature Gamera t-shirt today.
Nice. And...
I am Dr. Victor Von Doom. Welcome to my experiment, where you are now forced to watch the worst convention panels of all time, and I will assess your reactions.
We're at New York Comic Con?
Oh!
shots fired.
Oh my. Gary, we just started.
Hey, I almost said Wizard World, so you know. And then...
I am Torgo. The master has asked me to make sure you know about the master's podcast, the good, the bad, and the nerdy movie podcast.
Yes.
It's fun. The master also asked that we do many funny things. I will go and get our pizza, and hopefully I will not forget where I put the 2-liter.
And I am your humble host, Flint Rockbone, a.k.a. Gary Mitchell, a co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics Track with Joe Crow, who ducked out because he's a coward.
That is an interesting way to spell Flint.
Yes, indeed. Well, or actually, look, I got distracted by Torgo over there. He was going to be Flint. Or actually, no, was that Joe? Look, I don't have time for facts, okay? So we are here to talk about a lovely little thing of joy, MST3K, the creation of Joel Hodgson and a bunch of other crazy people. TV hosts were not exactly a new thing when MST3K started. There was Ghoulardi, there was Vampira, there was Elvira. Every local station and their brother had some goofball watching movies who would usually say something snarky about the movie before and after the commercial breaks. Joel's genius idea is, let's make fun of the movie while it's going. So let's start with Manos. When did you first stumble across MST3K?
Oh, it was when it was on Comedy Central. That was the first time I actually caught it. And it was one of those times when it was like a Saturday morning and I didn't have anything to watch. I was flipping through the channels and suddenly I stumbled upon this crazy show with some little silhouettes that watching this old movie. And then I just heard them making fun of the movie and I got hooked and I loved every single second of it. And I would laugh my backside off. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss here or not, so I'm assuming we don't.
You get 2 F-bombs.
Okay, good. I won't use my F-bomb here, but I laughed my ass off watching them, and then the whole experiment with Dr. Forrester and everybody. I just loved every second of it. So and I was hooked instantly.
Deanna?
It was my best friend, my new best friend at that point, Margaret Ann Park, who introduced me to it. Margaret is a bit older than I am, and she handed me a VHS tape. Kids, ask your parents. And it had what has now become my favorite MST3K episode on it, among others. It had Swamp Diamonds on it with the incredible What to Do on a Date short. MST3K became something that she and I would watch together, and it was silly. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I was in my early 20s, and I had honestly never seen anything like that before. And it became part of sort of the fabric, because the first date my now husband and I went on was actually to MST3K, the movie, at the local repertory theater. And the little art house thing and he got a joke off in the middle of it. A pun off in the middle of it. That should have been my warning. It goes back.
And you married him anyway.
I married him anyways. Yeah. So yeah.
All right. Gamera?
I got into the show through a friend of mine in school because I grew up in the woods. I didn't have cable, and he was like, "Oh, you got to come over to my house and watch this new show on, the Comedy Channel." And so I was completely smitten by it. It was, it came along at a time in my life when I really wanted a show that made me feel clever for getting references. And I remember seeing things like the first time I saw the Mr. B Natural short, I lost it. I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen in my life. One of the 3 or 4 times I laughed the hardest, and I was hooked from there.
Dr. Von Doom?
I believe it was sometime in around 1998 or 1999. I had just finished a campaign against the insipid Richards, and I had decided to watch this show that was on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I believe it was Spider Invasion was the first episode I saw. It gave me many good ideas of future things to do.
And Mr. B Natural there.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so I grew up in Tennessee, and for some reason we didn't get Comedy Central till I think it was 93, 94. So first time I got to watch it was basically when Mike had taken over, but they reran all of the Joel ones. So
right.
The first one I saw was Kitten with a Whip. But yeah, I will say though, during the first Turkey Marathon I saw, Mitchel was such a eye-opening episode.
Mitchell. There's a name that says, "Hey, how about a beer?"
And beers.
You can find the servo scream on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much the same thing for me. I found it in the comment. None of us, I think it's a very rare to find someone who watched it in the what they call the KTMA era when he first started it.
You had to be in Minneapolis, I think.
Right. And so it's a kind of amazing to me that this show, which started it and honestly should have died as a little experiment on an independent station in the middle of nowhere, went on to become a phenomenon. Because I stumbled across it like everybody else on Comedy Central or Comedy Channel at the time. And it was, it was in it was first season, was Dr. Einhorn was still on. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I think it took me like watching a second episode for me to for it to kind of click. Because that first episode, I kept going, would you guys shut up? I'm trying to watch this terrible old movie. And I remember when it clicked, I telling my friends about it, and they were all like, are you crazy? That sounds terrible. And then 6 months later, oh my God, there's this show called MST3K. And I'm like, you people, I was telling you about this. So for anybody who doesn't know the premise, Dr. Doom, would you like to please tell us what is the premise of MST3K? Being the mad scientist yourself.
Yes. Two incompetent, well, in the beginning it was two incompetent mad scientists subject a peon that they have found to the worst movies of all time. Their methods are not the best, let's put it that way. But remember, it is somewhat enjoyable to laugh at them.
Remember, he cannot stop the movies because the parts that stop the movies are what he used to make his robots.
Build his robots, yeah.
Yes.
And we don't need to wonder why he eats and breathes.
Oh, and other science facts.
La la la.
But I think it was that line it was that line in the theme song that hooked me. Was it's just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
Yeah.
And it was very clear from the beginning. It didn't take itself too seriously, and that was refreshing in an age when TV was starting to take itself quite seriously. Yeah.
Darren is saying we should just sing the song already. So, does everybody know the words?
Darren, do you really want this, Darren?
In the not too distant future, next Sunday, there was a guy named Joel.
Not too
different from you or me.
He worked at the
Economics Institute.
Just regular guy. It's your fault, Darren. All your fault, Darren.
There are multiple versions.
You did a good job cleaning up there, fellas.
Perfect 6-part harmony.
Yeah.
Robot roll call.
Robot roll call.
Robot.
Tom Servo.
So
no, it's a catchy theme song. We have to. When it switched to mic, then they made a minor change, which is okay. I felt like over the times, every time they adjust the theme song, it's a little awkward. But the newest version I like just because Felicia Day is singing in it. So
yes, yeah, and that's the other thing. This show is. I hate to use this comparison, but the show's a cockroach. You can't kill it. I mean, it's been around now for this long. And like I said, this is a show that shouldn't work. So
it is itself a B movie. It just will not die.
Well, it's like a sampled album. It's like there's rights issues are impossible sometimes for these films. So, that's one of the hilarious parts about this. That's why there's more people doing commentaries that you download and then play while you're watching the movie now, because you can't actually in most cases do this stuff. Back in the 80s and early 90s, those pre-DVD market, that wasn't even a concern, because a lot of these films were bargain bin, flea market, tapes that you'd forget even existed.
And they've actually talked about they've had kind of a detrimental effect on themselves, because they would pick some terrible movie because the rights were cheap, do it, the show would get so popular that then the rights would go through the roof and they couldn't afford the rights to the movie anymore.
Right.
So, Jason, why do you think the show works?
I just think there's an inherent value in watching a lot of these old films that were just so terrible, and we all are thinking the same things that the guys are saying, but they do such a great job at crafting the riffs that there's just an entertainment value just to seeing what the guys come up with. What are they going to say in this particular scene, in this particular shot? You know, when the rubber monster is like flapping all over the place and you're waiting for a crow to just deliver something, you know, there's just so much fun in watching them kind of put together their one-liners.
Yeah. Right, well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Quentin Tarantino has a thing where he designates certain movies hangout movies, like Rio Bravo or Dazed and Confused, where you're watching the movie to hang out with the characters. And I feel like Mystery Science Theater 3000 is almost the perfect hangout show.
It's
like
great.
You're hanging out with, you know, your pal Joel or Mike and your crazy robot friends who are more clever than you, you're watching this dumb movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Deanna?
I think part of it is also it plays to the geek quippy thing. Like, we are all jokes. Like, it seems to be something about geeks. We're all smart alecks and we all like to make jokes. And as much as we love bad movies, we also recognize how bad they really are. And this show does such a good job of kind of capturing that kind of just silliness of, you know, a group of friends hanging out in the basement watching a movie and just heckling the crap out of it because they're finding all the holes.
Yes. And I would like to thank Mr. B Natural for our product placement there.
Torgo has brought the drinks as requested. Sorry, a while. A double part.
And Dr. Doom, what makes it work for you?
Get that gag too, though. I mean,
oh yeah. Well, we get the gag.
But yeah, if you guys are watching, so in Manos, Torgo was a great moment. So Mike Nelson, in one of his first appearances, was Torgo. Yes. He was delivering pizzas at the end of Manos. He forgot the drink. 3 episodes later, he showed back up with the drink.
That's great.
I mean, it's a gag that you're like, oh, wow, they just sat on that gag for a while. And then occasionally he would just pop back up every now and then because they couldn't get rid of Torgo.
Yeah. Yeah. The show was fantastic about running gags and knowing which ones to keep going and which ones to when to drop it. And one of my favorite quotes they always talked about the writing was like, they were talking about, like, I don't know if we should do this riff. Not a lot of people will get it. And Joel's like, the right people will get it.
And I think with the density of the jokes, you could have a riff that not everyone would get. And the people who did get it loved it. But, you know, 30 seconds later, there'd be another joke that another segment of the audience would get.
Yeah, because early on, they were doing a lot of Minneapolis-related jokes because that was where they came from. So you know, as a Prince fan, I would always geek out whenever they do a Prince reference. But, you know, there was a lot of different Minneapolis-centric jokes that just completely went over my head. But, you know, like he said, I mean, give it a few seconds. They'll come up with a joke and you're laughing your ass off again.
So let's go ahead and jump right into the biggest debate of the show. I think. Mike or Joel, or
Jonah.
Or Jonah.
Yeah, Jonah.
Yeah.
So I'm a Joel guy. I'll admit it. I've been a fan of Joel when he was doing stand-up before he did the show. So
yeah, I mean, he was on SNL.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Mike. I just like the everyman kind of face on Mike, and also I think those were the most of the episodes I watched at the beginning. I didn't get the Joel stuff till later, and so, you know, it's Mike for me. But I also appreciate Joel. I don't think you have to pick one. This isn't like, you know, Team Edward, Team what's his face. This is like, you can like them all. It's okay.
I'm sorry, but I'm revoking your geek card. The versus debate is a standard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Kirk versus Picard. You know,
I'm Canadian. Can't we just all get along? Like,
no.
It is definitely Mike Nelson, though. Joel has admitted that his character was just a half-asleep guy, and Mike is definitely a far more engaging and funny character.
Well, Mike did want to actually get off the ship. That was a recurring bit. He was always trying to escape. For me, though, I prefer Joel only because I think the inventions were always more of a, that's a Joel Hodgson. That's part of his act. I think, especially maybe around season 3 or 4, that was when the writing was best. But that's also because Mike was doing most of the writing. I always felt like when he was the head writer and Joel was, Joel was the host, that was like the perfect combination.
Yeah.
So, and I think we should give credit, when he was the top, Mike was the best writer in the show, always was.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think Joel and Mike brought different energies to it, both of which I think are valid. I think Mike had kind of a harder edge. Mike enjoyed laying into a movie more than Joel did. Whereas I think Joel was kind of more of a straight man to the bots.
Right.
Yeah. For me, I'm a little biased because we actually got Joel on an interview for our show Transmissions from Atlantis. And it was actually when he was coming to DragaCon, and it was right before he had announced that they were going to bring the show back and that he was going to do the Kickstarter to try to bring the show back. And he was one of the nicest, most gracious guests that we ever had. And he was, I asked him for 15, 20 minutes of the time. We talked to him for an hour. And he didn't want to leave,
Oh, wow.
So it was great. I mean, and Mike is fantastic. I love Mike. Mike was a great host, but for me, it started with Joel. I'm kind of a traditionalist in that way where, the first guy that I see that made me fall in love with the show is the one that I always kind of endear towards.
You never forget your first Doctor Doom.
Yeah, you never forget your first Doctor, and you never forget your first MST3K host. And so for me, it was Joel.
Okay,
I will say somebody mentioned the invention exchanges, and I would like to say that in a world of Mythbusters and how it's made, it's good to see mad science on TV.
Yeah.
Yes, mad science needs the representation. But before we break into that real quick, people apparently at home are having trouble with the comments loading on Facebook. If you need to get out of expanded mode, and you'll see the comments. And please keep leaving the comments because that's basically you riffing. So, and now back to our program already in progress. Consider, we're going through the gates now, saving.
Yeah, what was everybody's favorite invention?
Oh boy, it's hard.
I loved when Mike Nelson was like Morrissey and Tupperware.
Oh,
that's a good one.
I thought that was so funny.
For me, it's the Steve-O-meter.
The what?
The Steve-O-meter. It's a device to determine if Steve Allen has already come up with this idea. Literally, so they would shine at something. Steve Allen's come up with it. Steve thought of it too. Even the Steve-O-meters.
Mine was I don't remember the name of the invention, but it was the one where TV Frank, you could see what would have been happening had you gone outside and lived a life instead of staying at home and watching the invention. And like the entire time, TV Frank is like, "Oh, there I am, and I'm getting a drink, and Christy Brinkley's come along," and it kept going, and he got progressively more and more depressed as he watched what his life would have been like had he gone outside instead of staying behind and watching what his life should have been on the TV. That was quite clever.
I gotta go with Nummy Muffin Cocoa Butter. The pet that's so cute that it'll take over the world because everyone wants. Just because I love Frank singing the song, and the very end of the episode, him staring out the window, "Nummy Muffin Cocoa Butter, come back." So because I love to death TV's Frank. I think he may be my favorite character of all of them. Just because Frank was just such a great, in the mold of Beaker. The whipping boy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He was such a great second banana.
And, in the Manos episode, he actually called them up to apologize for making them watch Manos. That's a rare one because that's the whole group saying commentary like, guys, we really hate this movie. We're even apologizing to you.
And, Gary, you had asked who's your favorite host. I mean, and then like the other side of that is who are your favorite Mads. And I think Dr. Forrester and Frank is my favorite iteration of the Mads.
Yeah. Yes.
Me too.
Me too.
I will say I love Patton and Felicia Day's take.
Yes.
It's not direct, but it's the spirit of how they're doing it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'll still never forget seeing on Twitter Patton Oswalt going, "They asked me to be the son of TV's Frank." I'm like, yes.
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 Patton Oswalt has the greatest agents. He's MODOK now. He's Matthew the Raven. He's hitting every nerd possible rant. He's already been quadruplets on Agents of
S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah. And he's been the historical reenactor nerd on Parks and Rec with the great Star Wars rant. Yeah, no, he's doing well.
Yeah,
so we'll do a whole Oswalt panel some other time. So us, and again, no, and nothing against Mary Jo either. Mary Jo is a delight as Dr. Forster's mom. And
the real fun in those is them going into various B-movie situations themselves. And of course, with the two B-movie characters of Dr. Bobo and Brain Guy.
Oh yeah, I forgot Dr. Bobo. That's right.
Yeah. Or Professor Bobo.
He got his professorate later on. He was doctor. I don't know if he lost his license or not.
He got a tenure finally, so that's why.
So I mean, there's so much to talk about with this show, and we could just sit here quoting quips like all night. Like I still to this day, there's a reason we call the panel, we put our faith in blast, because we put our faith in blast hard cheese is never far from my brain. Or the master wouldn't approve is always somewhere near my brain. Yes.
Viva the fold-out couch is mine from Swamp Diamonds, where that horrible Mardi Gras parade where it's all brown and yellow. That's the one I yell out randomly, and people look at me like, "What? Who is this weirdo?"
One day you're gonna do that. And someone's gonna go.
Mine is, "Aren't you me?" in another role from Quest.
Yes. I think my other favorite may be when they were watching The Creeping Terror and it eats this one guy and they go, "Oh, that's what happened to Dr. Einhorn." It's like it's a riff and a callback.
So it's the wood shop one, and the guy's like, "I love the smell of woodshed," and the crow responses, "And I put them in my underwear."
One of the most interesting things about the Kickstarter is that they're talking about doing shorts again, which they have.
Oh, that was amazing.
Season.
I would argue. Sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to say that I think that the shorts have been funnier overall for minute for minute than a lot of the movies that they've done.
Yeah, the video store I worked at in the late 90s, we had most of the popular episodes on tape, and the shorts collection was always the most rented one. Because
I believe it.
Those are, I think, funnier just because of just the shortness. I mean, they're only 15 minutes for each one of them usually, and they just go flat out like for the kill pretty quickly. And most of those are, like Mr. Be Natural is itself. You got to wonder what were they thinking when they made it, let alone when the guys got their hands on it. I mean, it's
imagine how excited they were.
The fact that they saw it and they're like, you can see like the lights hitting their heads and just like how bizarre it already was. You didn't even need it, like you could just air it and just have them just scream the entire time.
I mean, with a lot of the shorts are so square and kind of like
intentionally trying to be hip.
Yeah, Eisenhower era conservative. And they're very easy to bounce jokes off.
Right, because even the movies, even if they're old, they're still movies. But the shorts often were out of touch even in the time period that they were made, which makes them even funnier.
Yeah. The education, and we all had to sit through those educational films. Like if you think about it, we've all sat through those stupid educational films that were made probably 20 years before we hit school and were out of date when they were made. And then they're touching on a memory there that and you're right, they're the best to me. They're the best part of when you watch those shorts. You just insane.
I hope that they get their hands on more recent shorts, because those ones like educational things from the early 90s, there's so much material they can rip. I mean, if they get their hands on comic,
I want to see
All-Stars to the rescue. That alone.
Yeah, I want to see them get their hands on some 90s anti-drug PSA.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The cartoon All-Stars to the rescue is the perfect one for them to eviscerate.
Or industrial
ladies teach about why crack is bad.
Yes. Industrial films too,
oh yeah,
I think about when we took my son to the orthodontist. The orthodontist actually had a what are braces video we had to watch that clearly was shot about the same time as the first season of Saved by the Bell. And so, and understand my son is 13, so yeah.
Imagine if they could get their hands on some corporate training videos.
Oh, those would be amazing.
Gosh.
Amazing.
But yeah, the amount of videotape that's just floating around from old, late 80s, early 90s health educational things, that alone could be worth the destruction. So let's hope that, this Kickstarter they've had has been glorious how much they've gotten out of this. So they should have a lot of potential what they can destroy with.
Where are they at right now?
They're fully funded. They've blown through all their goals.
Oh, they are fully funded in 5 days, I think.
Yeah. No, but I'm just wondering, how many, what are they looking for and where are they at? Do you know?
No, 12 episodes and 12 shorts.
Yeah, they've done a full season. They're building their own streaming platform.
Wow.
I mean, it's insane how much.
Yeah, they got
$1 million over their highest stretch goal.
Because one of the things that was interesting is, I'm going to cross fandoms here, but Joel actually appeared on a sort of wrap up of the Critical Role Legend of Vox Machina campaign, because they kind of blew past the MST3K goal when they got 11 million to make their animated Critical Role. And so I'm wondering if MST3K, if this is going to be sort of the new standard, we're going to blow past that, because MST3K was the original standard for sort of crowdfunding for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier. This is a show that should have died. This is a show that never should have been a success. This is a show that should have been, strangled in the crib. And especially because it started in Minnesota, it moves to the Comedy Channel, which is just this minuscule cable network. And not a lot of people can get it, but the fandom grabs it. Mm-hmm. And that's why forever in a lot of the early episodes, you'll see keep circulating the tapes.
Yeah.
Because people would tape it and mail it around. You're going to say...
And I was just going to say, and to be honest, I think MST3K had a lot to do with the Comedy Channel becoming Comedy Central and becoming a much bigger show, and then getting Jon Stewart to come do the Daily Show and things like that. I don't think they would have had a chance in hell of doing that without MST3K giving them a little bit more exposure and having people wanting to watch their channel.
Yeah, there was a run where that was their flagship show. They were showing they were showing it every night at midnight.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was on 3 times a day too. You'd be on in the morning, and they run an afternoon version with Monty Python afterwards. I mean,
and let's be honest, if you're a Comedy Central or Comedy Channel with a limited production run of stand-up comics from the 80s, MST3K as a 2-hour block is there's a lot of programming off my neck.
Yeah.
They even edited several of them into 1-hour segments where there'd be a part 1 and a part 2 so that they could fill in 1-hour blocks also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I do remember that for a time they pulled the keep circulating the tapes because the lawyers started yelling at them.
Yeah. It's the evolution of the show too. I mean, it's when Comedy Central was kind of at its early heyday, it was all, Who's Line reruns, Monty Python reruns. They were, Kids in the Hall, and then it was just, MST3K. I mean, that was their show. Everything else was just, replays of something else. Yeah, and that was a big deal for them. And, it built, besides Politically Incorrect, they didn't have much original programming.
Mm-hmm. And night after night with Alan Havey.
Oh, I loved that show, by the way.
Yeah.
I loved his interview with Clive Barker, but that's a whole other panel.
Yeah. And I was like a lot of people. I was not happy when it went to Sci-Fi Channel because it just felt and it wasn't against I love Sci-Fi Channel, but it felt like it wasn't
the vibe changed.
Yeah, there was a theme change. I mean, a lot of changes.
Well, the Sci-Fi Force.
I think there's like a 2-year gap anyway before it finally debuted on Sci-Fi.
And Sci-Fi dictated that they had to do this. Had to do science fiction.
Yeah, movies. They had to do sci-fi, and that they lost some of what. And while some of the greatest ones they've ever done were science fiction, like Santa Claus versus the Martians, like, but that meant they lost, like, if you think about it, the PSAs, they lost
Mitchel.
They lost Swamp Diamonds, which I think is just like the whole running gag about Mike Connor's name is just. And it's one of those beautiful things that, you know, which they were so good at doing, where they would introduce a joke and then they would walk away from the joke, and then 10 minutes later, just a passing reference to the joke again. And they would just keep circling back to that joke every so often. When the movie slowed down and they needed a line, there would come like tickle Connors, thrust Connors. Like they just toss it out. And you'd be like, "Oh my God, that joke!" You know,
and they did that. They did that so well too, where they revisit the same riff, and they keep needling it, you know, right at the right times, like you were saying.
Yeah. So and but unfortunately, when they went to Sci-Fi, they lost that sort of part of the 1950s, 1960s canon that was so ripe for riffing.
And they had already done so much. That was the thing, like. They had already done a lot of Gamera. They'd already done, I mean, it was like by the time I got to Sci-Fi, most of the good stuff they'd already covered. So it's, you know, they were on a limit, and Sci-Fi wouldn't, you know, agree to pay for some of the, I mean, like, they weren't going to get Logan's Run.
Right. Yeah. And because I want it on the record, the MST3K Kickstarter unlocked 14 episodes, $6,300,000 with an additional $600,000 that was raised outside of Kickstarter.
Wow.
So yeah, nerds got money.
Yep. And so they're going to be creating their own app. So they're not going to be reliant on Netflix or any of the other streaming services. They're going to stream themselves. They're going to have those 14 episodes. And I believe Jonah and Felicia and Patton are coming back, right?
Right.
Yep. Everybody's back.
Yeah.
And Joel is going to host one episode himself.
Yes, and Joel's going to host an episode.
Joel's hosting too, and Emily, who toured with them.
Yeah, they built a theater. They're going to do live shows too, so the audience have audiences to watch. So, you know, for because I think that's another fun advantage. I mean, we've seen some of when Cinematic Titanic and all of them will do a live show. So they're building. They basically have a small space they've acquired. They're setting it up for, you know, live performances, and you know that'll be another way to generate more, you know, keep this going, because you know they'll, you know, people will buy admission, and they'll just kind of keep funding. And you know their only issue will maybe rights for some of these movies, but I think some of these low budget studios that own some of these rights will be happy to get it out there. I mean, I think now they're at the point where their name brand is so important that I'm sure, you know.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's like we have movies that either would have been lost to obscurity that suddenly became popular just because they were on MST3K. Gamera, there is a whole generation of people who discovered Friend of All Children just because it was on MST3K.
I have that on the metal box set next door. Yeah,
I mean, Steve Reeves. Let's be honest. A lot of people my age had no idea who Steve Reeves was until they may have heard the line in Rocky Horror, but you know, not until we got to, you know, the few of the Hercules movies, and another great Mike Nelson impression.
Yes. Yep. And I also want to point out, since we were talking about them also doing other stuff, Kevin Eldridge, hi Kevin, points out that the Mads do monthly online shows and do sometimes riff shorts. And if you're coming to Dragon Con, they're usually there.
And I think Darren Bush also put in the comments that
well, we don't care what Darren said.
Well, I do. I'm going to be nice. You know, we also have Mike now doing riff tracks, right? So,
yes.
and you talked about Cinema Titanic. There's a bunch of different sort of, and I know we've all been to cons where people have done their own versions of this at a con with like the Phantom Menace, let's say, or something like that, where we riff on a movie.
Battlefield Earth.
Yeah. You know, and we take those things and we do it ourselves. We've all seen that at cons. So
And while it's fun to watch those, it also gives you an appreciation for what Mike and Joel and the creative team for MST3K, because it's not easy to do. It seems like it would be, but it's not, and it's not easy to be consistently funny and keep it being funny throughout the whole horrible movie that you're watching.
Well, and just think about how many times they would have had to watch that movie to write that script.
They
to do those, like, how many times did they have to watch Manos Hands of Fate? Like, holy, or
they
the
said
creepy terror.
Twice.
Oh
they normally watched it 3 to 4 times with to write all their jokes, but they said 2 was the most they could handle it. I mean,
Doom, you were gonna say?
Yes, I've heard people criticize MST3K for being too scripted, but if you hear a lot of these ones that people do that they're just doing it off the cuff, it isn't anywhere near as funny because they haven't prepared for it. And I think the scripting is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
If you can track down the KTMA episodes, some of those are not scripted, and they're doing it on the fly, and you can tell that there's a difference even with the MST3K group.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking earlier about Mike being the head writer and how well that worked. And that is because, and I've never done it, but I've seen it done, Joe, where people do the live riffing. And if you're trying to do it live, you're too focused, I think, on trying to be funny and just react. Whereas if you watch it in advance, you watch it 2 or 3 times, you go, okay, here's a good line. There's a good line. And you can weed out.
Yeah.
It's harder to be spontaneously funny than people think it is.
And
just look at this panel.
Yeah, some of these movies are so bad anyway. It's almost like you got to figure out like what's the joke that's worth it. I mean, Plan 9 is hilarious on its own. You can just crack. I mean, you just watch it, you crack up. You don't even have to make a comment. It's just that bad. So if you're going to do jokes about Plan 9, you pretty much need to time it well. So I mean.
Yeah, and they've even said a mediocre movie is harder to riff.
And that's been one of the problems in the later seasons, like with Netflix, is that their choice of movies was so low that they were picking some movies that they really ought not to have done, because it's really the low quality ones, the really bad ones that make the best.
I mean, we all wanted Mac and Me. I was like, when they announced it was Mac and Me, that was the whole point of me watching that. I was like, I'll go through all of them because I'm glutton for punishment, but getting to Mac and Me because I wasted $6 to see that in the theaters. Oh, my grandmother was so mad I made her watch that.
No, rightfully so.
But at the same time, it had a dance sequence in McDonald's.
Now, other than Mac and Me, has there been another movie that has been riffed on Mystery Science Theater 3000 that you guys have seen without the bots and without the Joel or Mike? And been like, man, I miss the bots. I miss Joel.
Every time. I grew up watching those movies on UHF as a kid on Saturday afternoons, and sometimes you try to go back to watch them without the bots, and it's just like you throw the riffs in yourself because you miss it.
Right.
I mean, I'm never gonna watch Manos Hands of Fate without the robots. So like, because there's no way. I mean, no way. No, I'm trying to think, like, because Your Hunter from the Future was done with riff tracks. I saw that before.
Well, I've definitely seen some of the Godzilla films, and obviously Gamera, and a few of the other, monster flicks that they've had, and I definitely have missed, the riffing going on.
This Island Earth.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, the first one that they consider it was a good movie that they did. Unfortunately, Dr. Forrester is God must leave. Pimp yourself before you go.
Yeah, folks, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, it's the Good, the Bad, and the Nerdy Movie Podcast. We're in the middle of our Coen Brothers series, and then we're going to be jumping back onto our 1994 series, where we upcoming we'll be doing such classics as The Shadow, Street Fighter, and Pulp Fiction. So thanks for letting me on, and please keep circulating the tapes, guys.
Yes. All right. So we're closing in on our closing time. So let's go around the horn, starting with the Good Doctor. What is your go-to episode to show someone who's never seen it before and say, this is what you need to be watching?
That is a good question. I think I'm going to go with one, even though everyone's been saying that the Sci-Fi Channel episodes are not as good. My personal favorite is Quest of the Delta Knights. And so I think that would be a very good one to show.
Okay. And Gamera?
I feel like the best episodes of the show in terms of movies are the ones where the host and the robots build up a head of steam with the movie, and like it gets funnier as it goes on in terms of like how they're interacting with it. And I think one of the movies that works really well with is Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. I think there are a lot of great Pia Zadora jokes. There's an awesome Patrick Swayze song in the host segment.
Yes, Patrick Swayze Christmas is one of the best things ever done.
It's so good. Even Crow saying, like, I want to decide who lives and who dies. I think that episode is like probably my favorite, and that's the one I use when I want to get people hooked.
Right, Deanna?
I'm going to go back to Swamp Diamonds and What to Do on a Date, because in addition to the great running joke about Mike Connor's name, the What to Do on a Date short is, when we talk about that classic 1950s PSA, it is so horrible and so jilted, and the jokes are just hilarious. But then that's the interstitials for the rest of the show is, I think my brain is failing me, but I think it's Servo wanting to ask Gypsy out on a date. And so they have they recreate the scavenger sale. They have them go on a date. Gypsy kind of leaves them, dumps them cold and moves on. And so there's all sorts of pain going on. And it's just really quite clever. So when you talk about weaving the pieces together, they keep coming back to the short at the beginning, which is just brilliant. Swim meets are incredibly dull. Weeding roasts. No, Jim, no! It's just so good.
Manos?
Well, you would think I would pick Manos: The Hands of Fate, but actually, I'm
the starter episode.
I'm actually going to go with The Amazing Colossal Man, and one of the reasons why I'm going with that one is because I actually watched it before I saw it on MST3K. I watched it on Creature Feature with Paul Bearer, and it was actually a movie that I enjoyed watching, and to see them actually riff on it and have and gave me a whole different take on that movie, and the riffs were fantastic. So that's my pick.
Yeah, for me, it's either The Creeping Terror, which was one of
that was good too,
which was a fantastic one, or it's Lost Continent, just because that movie with so much padding. And listening to Joel and the bots going, "Oh my God, they're still climbing," is hilarious, because they're feeling what we would feel watching it without the bots. Oh dear God, they're climbing again. And for me, that really stressed the whole what makes MST work, is because their pain is our humor.
Yes.
There's a reason deep hurting. Now, again, that is, like I said, that's a good starter episode, because we've all got favorite episodes. And Manos, one of my absolute favorites, I knew a relationship wasn't going to work out when they did not like that episode.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this isn't going anywhere. But you don't start someone with Manos.
No.
That's too deep.
No.
Oh.
That would be Cruel and Unusual Punishment. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
Darren said, "Rock climbing Joel."
Manos is like their difficult double album.
Yeah. Their experimental phase.
Manos is Tusk. You want to start them on rumors.
Speaking of which, I can't believe Lindsey Buckingham's getting divorced again, but he needed a new album. So, hey.
Deep cut.
Yes. So, anyway, kind of getting back on the topic. We talked about our favorite invention. We talked about favorite characters. We talked about our favorite eras. So, again, the show is enduring just because, like Deanna said earlier, geeks are smartasses. And this really feeds into. And I think that it made it look easy But of the follow-up contenders, Cinematic Titanic, Riff Tracks, everybody and their brothers podcast doing a commentary of some kind, trying to be funny. Is there one that you guys think is at least close, or does MST just stand alone?
For me, there's nothing comparing to MST3K. When it came back, it felt like coming home again for me. Because I've watched Riff Tracks, and I appreciate what Mike and them have tried to recreate with that. But for me, it's just it doesn't hit the same, as the bots, and because it's just kind of unique that that you have these two inanimate puppets. It's almost like watching the Muppets riff something, right? But at the same time, it's that unique dynamic of the concept of the show, and that there's something around the show other than just the movie itself. Riff Tracks and Cinematic Titanic and all these other ones, they just riff the movie. Okay, so yeah, it can be funny, but there's a subplot. There's a plot B, to MST3K. There's always something that they're experimenting with, or there's some kind of other running gag that's always going on that makes it unique unto itself.
Dummy muffin cocoa butter, or
what to do on a date.
What to do on a
date.
Yeah. Or and I had one and it just flew right out of my brain. But yeah, you're right. I think that is part of it, is that framing sequence and giving us them on the satellite of love is part of that glue.
Yeah.
The only thing that I've seen that's almost as good was at the Otakon convention. They used to do mystery anime theater, showing awful animes like Crusher Joe or Samurai Showdown. And they did the whole thing. They had a person, they had their own crow and servo. In the later ones, they actually started with different bots that were slightly different. But then they would do host segments and all of that, and it was pre-scripted, and they had put a lot of loving care into writing the scripts and everything. And it's the only time I've seen that done to that degree to emulate the show.
I have an enormous amount of affection for everyone involved in classic MST3K, and going to the live shows and being able to sort of, the jokes are funny, and being able to project the love there is a great thing to do. I love going to see the Mads. I love going even to the Riff Tracks shows back when we could do that during the pandemic. But Manos is right. There's something about this format with the robots and being like the weird convoluted storyline behind watching the movie. I will say with the new version, I think the new version is funny, but there's an element in the original of it kind of being out of the Midwest, and it kind of being a lot of people who were not, quote unquote Hollywood. Kevin Murphy was like a production tech at a UHF station who got involved in this show. So the new version, I feel, doesn't have as much of a kind of scrappy DIY, let's put on a show vibe as the classic one did. But it's kind of like when the indie band you like signs to a major label. Yeah. It's not that it's not good. It's just, things move on and you can appreciate what was there.
It gets polished.
They sold out. No, just kidding.
Yeah, but it's like they've got Felicia Day there. They've got Patton Oswalt there, who I like a lot of stuff both of those people have done. But I do miss that kind of DIY vibe original MST3K had.
Well, because if you think about it, to further on that, like Mike and Joel were great comedians. They weren't great actors. And so there was a roughness to the originals, even on Comedy Central and on Sci-Fi. And now they're dipping into people who are more actors with Felicia Day and Patton Oswalt. It doesn't mean I don't love them. I love them. I love both of them a lot. But you're right. Like there's a roughness to it. There's like a kids. It's like you're watching a show about a group of kids putting on a show to save the library from being demolished by the evil developer. It's got kind of level of production value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I say this as someone who donated to the
flat Midwestern sense of humor.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you want to talk about successors, I mean, I also think we need to recognize the cultural impact of this beyond just Comedy Central. Like, if you think about the number of podcasts out there whose sole purpose it is to talk about bad movies. That's the reason why the podcast exists. So how did this get made? There's a Blank Check, where they went through the entire Star Wars series, and their whole run of the prequels is just like as they rip it up and shred it to pieces. So there's a whole sort of industry about discussing bad movies that has come out of this, that has come straight from MST3K. Like there's no way to look at it. And even if you look at the character of Heinz Doofenshmirtz in Phineas and Ferb, he wears a green lab coat and has wild, like it's the Mad. It's it's Forrester right there. Like it is him, and that's so you can see where this is kind of pushed, and he creates these crazy inventions every episode that he's going to use to take over the world. Like, so there's an impact from this that goes beyond just what Joel did. It goes into comedy, it goes into now children's television. It's had a huge impact.
Yeah. It's one hell of a show, and the fact that, like I said, the fact that it even exists, the fact that it was a success, that it remains a success, that it remains popular this long, that they're still making it, especially comedy shows, because comedy is, I think, the worst at aging. I mean, try to go back and watch like a sitcom from the 80s or the 90s, and sometimes it's painful.
Yeah, my goal is to get my feature film on the reboot of MST3K. Joel, you wouldn't have to pay a cent. I will give it to you. Just put it on there. I want to see you do it, please.
Yeah, I do wonder how many times they've had, tapes show up in the middle.
Well, I mean, that's something that I'm a fan of. How did this get made with that crowd? And they talk about that there's an unintended consequence. That, they're worried that some movies get a sequel because the sales or the rentals go up because as everybody watches the movie to prepare for the next podcast. And I think that might be an unintended. I think there is a bump.
There is. Yeah, there is a known Misty bump.
I mean, how many of us would have watched?
Which should be a character in the upcoming season at some point. Misty Bump.
Misty Bump.
And I can tell you that my wife gave me a very cross look when I said that whole thing about making our movie on there.
I kill you!
Yes.
So we're coming up around the end of our hour. So starting with Torgo up here, is there anything you wanted to mention that we hadn't gotten around to yet, that or your final thoughts?
No, I mean, I just love MST3K. I'm glad it's living on, and I can't wait to see what they do with their app. I'm excited to see what Joel comes up with, because so far, the reboot has been, it's different, like they said, it's a bit different than the old show, but I still enjoyed every minute of it, and I couldn't wait for another season, and I'm excited to see what they do next.
All right, Deanna?
I think we have to mention Turkey. I think we mentioned it in passing, but Turkey Day I think is a big thing, because I know that's not a special day for us up here. You guys have Thanksgiving far too late, but just the idea that especially that you can go onto YouTube and watch entire runs of Turkey Day, or Netflix had the Turkey Day marathon. That for many people becomes a tradition that, okay, now we finished our turkey, now we're going to go watch some MST3K. Yeah, watch it. So that was a nice tie-in for them, and that I hope continues. I also am excited to see what Joel does when he has complete control, because I think that as much as I like the reboot on Netflix, I wonder how much was Netflix interference. Netflix is pretty hands-off for the most part, but there's always a suit telling you what to do. So if Joel can do everything the way he maybe started out back when he was doing the basic cable thing, it might be interesting to kind of see what he does.
Camera?
I think, building on what you said about Netflix, I think the main thing that Netflix did in terms of meddling was how it was released. I think Netflix puts out all its episodes of a season at once. And I think one of the things they're going to do differently with the new Gizmoplex app is, do an episode a month and make it be more of an event, which I think will serve the show better. Because when a season drops of 12 90-minute episodes, I think that can seem daunting to a lot of people, and I think it hurt the show in terms of finding a new audience. So I'm hoping that the new way going forward will help build and create more Misties.
And Von Doom?
He's been name checked, but shout out to Kevin Murphy, longest running member of the cast. Tom Servo came into his own when Kevin started playing him, and is sort of the erudite, more intelligent of the bots. Definitely far more fun than Crow.
Yes.
And isn't that something like I this is something I experienced when voices changed on the bots. It's almost like when Kermit's voice changed on the Muppets. You're like, no, that's wrong, and you understand it has to happen, but at the same time, it feels wrong, right? Like just wrong.
Yeah. Hashtag not my servo.
Not my servo.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest problem that I had getting into the new version of the show was the different voice in the bots.
Yeah. I have to say, one of my prized possessions is when I worked at Time Warner, I got a little plastic gumball machine, and I painted it, and I took it to Dragon Con, and it's signed by everybody except Mike and Dr. Einhorn. And I was very, very happy. It's a prized possession.
Cool.
All right. So we'll go back the other direction. Dr. Doom, where can people find you online if they need more from the Lord of Latveria?
Well, you can always go to Latveria.com. Latveria is usually a very pleasant country to go to. Right now, we are fumigating. We've had journalists lately, and we need to get rid of them. So right now, I am in Wisconsin, crashing at my friend Nathan's place. You can catch him on the 42 cast. It is your ultimate answer to fandom, geekiness, and everything.
It's a good show. Nathan's a good guy.
I have not liquidated him yet.
Yes. Gamera, who are you really, and how can people find you?
Hey, my name is Kevin Cafferty. I have a podcast called Gleaming the Tube that's about skateboard movies, most of which are bad. You can check it out at gleamingthetube.net. Our most recent episode is about the Simpsons movie, which is too enjoyable to be a subject of an MST3K episode.
Yes. I'm assuming you're getting around to The Crow at one point, if you haven't already.
The Crow is on the list, yes.
Okay. Deanna.
So I have a teacher Twitter, but nobody really wants to follow me there unless you want to talk about math teaching and assistive technology.
That would be you, Darren.
But hey, math is awesome. But I do run the Revolution SF Facebook group, Facebook page. So you are welcome to go there and enjoy the memes and, keep circulating the tapes.
All right. Torgo.
Yep, I am JC Delatorre. I create fiction podcasts as well as animation. And you can find our stuff at transmissionsfromatlantis.com.
Right. And I am, of course, Gary Mitchell, your lovely co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics Track. If you look down below, you'll see the Join Our Club house where we're at on the Facey-Bookie. You can find me on the Twitter as @Gary_Mitchell. That's Mitchell with one L. And you can also find me on this week's episode of Execute Chapter 66, the best Star Wars podcast out there and it's about Star Wars fiction. And we're talking about the book From a Certain Point of View, 40 stories from 40 side characters in A New Hope. And give it a listen. It was a lot of fun. 40 episodes, 40 short stories, 35 of them are great. All right. And you can also find us here every Thursday doing this. There's a little servo. So next week, if I am not mistaken, yes, next week we will be back for Joe's birthday. It is Joe Crow. We will be celebrating his birthday by putting him on the spot. We are taking submissions now. Give us a geek topic, and we will randomly select them, and Joe must talk about it for 5 minutes, even if he knows nothing about it.
Can you do he's not allowed to talk about Manimal for an entire hour?
I don't think that's physically possible. I would have to be there and restrain him in person.
It's his birthday.
To bend reality.
It's his birthday. We have to let him talk about Manimal. Come on.
If not, then when?
Right. Exactly.
All right. So, and I think Joe is somewhere in the background and controlling all this. If he wants to pop in and say hello, I suppose he should. If not, thank everybody for coming. Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming every Thursday. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell anybody. Like they say, keep circulating the YouTube stream.
La la la.
La 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 la. We should just while we wait for Joe to turn this off, we should just watch a bad movie and.
Oh yeah, totally. And
that,
I also remember
that ought to go well.
Yeah, I did love the one of the I watched. Man, we're just kibitzing now. The one that I had seen before as a kid terrified me. The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I watched it like late night on a Saturday, and the scene where the thing in the room rips the guy's arm off and he staggers, smearing blood on the walls. I was like a terrified little 7-year-old, and I watch it with MST3K, and I'm like, this was scary. What was wrong with me?
I rented Alien from LA because I was a Kathy Ireland enthusiast, and that movie is terrible. And then I was excited when it wound up on MST3K.
Oh, that's a really good talk about that movie. The heckling is just so good. Hi, Kathy. Like just the cars going by. It's so good. Yeah. Makes a bad movie easier to digest.
Yeah, you really wonder where they get it sometimes, but again, because they watch the show a few times. Yeah. All right, Joe, you've made it awkward.
Like a joke that's gone on too long, Joe.
Yeah. I remember Kevin Murphy was doing a Dragon Con panel. He told me when he took over for J. Elvis Weinstein, someone sent him an enormous banner in the mail that was printed on a dot matrix printer that said, "I hate Tom Servo's new voice."
Oh.
So he hung it up in his office.
Fans.
Yeah.
Fans can be jerks.
So see, we weren't just toxic now. Take
No,
back.
we've always been toxic.
Yay.
we just now have things like Twitter where people can actually see what the heck we're saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's evolved like the T2.
Yes.
Joe, we're running out of things to talk about, Joe.
I ran out of things to talk about 40 minutes ago. What are you talking about?
This is Joe's experiment.
Yeah, that's it. Joe is now the mad. Yes, this is Joe paying us back in advance for next week, as Kyle says there. And I know he's around somewhere. I hear his theme music. He's creeping around in the back somewhere because he posted y'all go on as long as you want. I'll be back. If people have things they need to do, go ahead.
Well, what we should do is start riffing Manimal, and then he'll jump on here super quick.
Oh, absolutely. Kevin Eldridge, you didn't think this was going to end, did you?
Another thing about Manimal.
Yeah. Oh, the Manimal Panimal. Yeah, he will never let anybody live it down that he managed to get the lady from the show to autograph that Manimal banner. So let's talk about Joe some more. Let's make fun of Joe. Let's riff Joe. Oh, somebody's out.
Oh,
lost Doom.
We lost Doom. Doom was smart. I'm out.
You have to go.
Yeah.
New plot against Reed Richards.
This is like ending like a Monty Python sketch or movie. Like it's just.
So what happens if we all left? Would it just?
It would just keep broadcasting till Joe wandered in and turned it off.
We should do that.
Is this bit going on YouTube as well?
Yeah, this is streaming on the YouTube live.
I mean, like after the fact, like people are.
Oh no, it's live. Yeah, it stays up on the YouTube. It's
okay.
It's like all things on the internet. It's there forever.
Okay. Yeah,
like
I didn't know if
pictures you let your ex take when it was a bad idea.
I didn't know if there was like an edited version that went up after.
So this could be
us.
This could be one of those panels between panels, like we do at the con. Yeah. So like, anybody want to talk about Highlander? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Highlander 2.
Oh, there is no Highlander 2. So did anybody watch the new trailer for the new He-Man Masters of the Universe?
Yes. Did.
That looked friggin' wild, didn't it?
It looks better, a lot better than I thought it was going to look.
I'm actually impressed that Adam is skinny.
Yeah.
Because in the original cartoon, he was not skinny. He was like, how could you? Like, what? No, it's the same guy.
It's the same body type, same face, same page boy haircut.
And nobody noticed. Clark Kent's glasses.
Yeah. Oh, my personal fan theory was like, he's Prince Adam. So everybody's like, oh, it's He-Man. Who could he possibly? He's gonna kill us if he. Isn't that He-Man? Let the crazy prince have his delusion.
Even Skeletor wouldn't touch that.
Yeah.
We find out He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is a big Truman Show kind of thing, That's your reboot. Call me Kevin Smith.
And I'm kind of actually looking forward to Mark Hamill's version of Skeletor. But then again, it's Mark Hamill. I'll watch him, read the phone book.
Or Tomato.
Yeah. I just hope they do a Christmas special.
Oh, yeah, they have to. I have to say, isn't that one of the weirdest things about He-Man is that his mother is from Earth?
Yeah.
That is a weird part of the case. Like, it doesn't need to be there, except for the Christmas special.
Yeah. As Sherman points out, He-Man threw an entire mountain. Don't get on his bad side.
She never seems to miss Earth, and Eternia looks like kind of a drag, man.
Yeah. Well, it's like Conan meets. Yeah, it's Conan meets Flash Gordon. I mean,
they don't know Mystery Science Theater 3000 there.
No,
but they should.
They should. You gotta watch Orko do tricks.
That's the weirdest part of that teaser for me is Orko actually looks competent.
Yes.
Is that allowed?
I don't think so.
No.
There he is.
There he is. So like I was saying about Joe and his hair.
Man.
This is like the telethon episode of Parks and Recreation where we're just trying to fill air.
Well, thank you guys for coming and hanging out.
Read Darren's comment.
Read us out.
Paneling, Joe. Paneling.
We should have all done this in a paneled room.
Well, yeah. Well, why have we not been able to? Well, there's another track that does this, and they do all the Mystery Science.
Not as well.
But we've never done a panel about
panels. Oh,
yeah, or about this. But of course, I'm sure you guys all got to this. Mystery Science Theater 3000 is kind of a formative show for a lot of us. It had been going on for several years when me and Gary started our internet journalism careers at zealot.com and Deanna too. And I got to meet Mike at DragonCon one year and also got to interview Mike when me and Shane Ivey were working at Heckler's Online. And of course, he was hilarious and nice. But my favorite thing was I got to ask him a question that I realize now lots of people probably asked him. I asked him, well, who do you like better, Joel or Mike? And he said that he preferred Joel.
Well, Joe, that's right up there with your Lou Ferrigno story, which I'll make you tell next week on your birthday.
Yes.
That's called a tease, people.
That is called a tease. But Mike said that if he and Joel got in a fight, like who would win? This was like, I was thinking Sci-Fighters 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, but who would win? And he had a definitive answer. He said definitely Joel, because he is an expert in Filipino stick fighting. I'm just going with what Mike Nelson told me. So I figure he would know.
Joel's an inventor too, like Batman.
Oh yeah.
See,
you give him time to prepare.
If you give him time to prepare, he's going to win. Yeah. We don't know about Mike Nelson. But guys, thank you. Are you guys done?
Yeah, we've been done for a while, Joe.
Oh well, we've been done for a while, Joe.
Joe, you let us all down.
Like it's never happened before. Ha, just kidding. I always satisfy 10 times out of 10. Thank you, guys, very, very much for coming and hanging out with us. I will end the broadcast now, but join us next week when Gary Mitchell will say...
I thought we were going to have ice cream and concrete, not cake. I don't know. I'm pulling from ass here.
Oh, okay.
Manimal.
You just made me stretch too long, Joe.
Crow!
It stinks.